On the morning of December 7th, 1941, a small but momentous event occurred that would foreshadow the events to come that day. While patrolling the entrance to Pearl Harbor a little more than an hour before the attack on Pearl Harbor kicked off, USS Ward made history by firing the first American shot of World War II. In a brief but decisive encounter, Ward sank a Japanese midget submarine that was attempting to infiltrate the harbor. While her role on that infamous day is often overshadowed by larger events, her actions were no less significant. Ward, a Wicks-class destroyer of World War I vintage, measured 314 feet in length, had a beam of 30 feet, and displaced just over 1,200 tons. She sported a main battery of four 4-inch 50 caliber guns and had two 3-inch 23 caliber guns for air defense, as well as 12 21-inch torpedo tubes. Two geared steam turbines drove her two shafts, and she was capable of 35 knots. Ward was manned by 231 officers and enlisted men. Due to the pressing need for destroyers to cover the North Atlantic convoys during World War I, her construction was pushed rapidly. Her keel was laid down on May 15, 1918, at the Mare Island Navy Yard in Vallejo, California, and she was launched a mere 17 days later on June 1st, which was a record at that time. On July 24th of the same year, she was commissioned into the United States Navy with Commander Milton S. Davis in command. Despite her record-setting building time, she was commissioned too late to take part in the First World War. Following her shakedown and initial training, Ward cleared the West Coast on December 2, 1918, to take part in the annual winter maneuvers in the Guantanamo Bay area. In May 1919, she moved to the North Atlantic and provided navigational aids and lifeguard station services for the transatlantic flight of several Curtiss NC flying boats. In July 1919, Ward transited the Panama Canal. She proceeded north and called at several Californian ports before heading to Portland, Oregon. She then returned south and operated out of San Diego for the remainder of 1919 and into 1920. Ward subsequently joined many of her sisters in the reserve fleet when she was decommissioned on July 21, 1921. With the Axis powers threatening the peace and the security of the world during the late 1930s, the U.S. Navy began to mobilize, and Ward was recommissioned on January 15, 1941, with Lieutenant Commander Hunter Wood, Jr. in command. She got underway for Hawaiian waters in short order and stood into Pearl Harbor during the forenoon watch on March 9th. Assigned to Destroyer Division 80, her main job was to patrol the channel entrance to Pearl Harbor. As tensions with Japan increased following the July 1941 oil embargo and the accession of the Tojo cabinet in October, a war warning was issued in late November to force commanders in Hawaii. Accordingly, Admiral Husband E. Kimmel, the commander-in-chief of the Pacific Fleet, ordered his patrols to depth-charge any suspicious submarine contacts they got while operating inside the established defensive sea area. With those orders, Ward was essentially operating on a wartime footing. Lieutenant William W. Outerbridge relieved Lieutenant Commander Wood on December 5th, and just before 6:30 a.m. on the 6th, Outerbridge took his first sea command out for a routine patrol. At 4:08 on December 7, 1941, Ward's men went to General Quarters to search for a suspected submarine detected by the minesweeper Condor, but did not find anything. Meanwhile, the cargo ship Antares was standing in from Palmyra Island. Not sighting the tug she was supposed to rendezvous with at 6:30, she altered her course and turned to the east to wait. As she was undertaking this maneuver, her watch suddenly spotted a suspicious object about 1,500 yards off her starboard quarter. Antares signaled Ward about the suspicious object, and within minutes, lookouts aboard Ward noticed a small wake astern of the auxiliary. Within moments, Ward's men were rousted from their bunks. It was a two-man Japanese Kō-hyōteki-class midget submarine, similar to the one in this picture, that had been spotted. Ward charged at the submarine like a terrier, and the first shot of the Pacific War barked out from her forward-most 4-inch gun at 6:45 and splashed harmlessly beyond the small conning tower. As Ward pounded past 25 knots, her number 3 gun atop the galley deckhouse amidships commenced fire, and its round passed squarely through the sub's conning tower. As the Japanese midget sub sunk out of sight, the destroyer swiftly dropped 4 depth charges over the spot she had last seen it on the surface. Black water gushed upwards in the ship's boiling wake as the charges went off. Outerbridge radioed an action report to the headquarters of the 14th Naval District, but delays resulted in the message's tortuously slow transmission up the chain of command. Ward searched for further contacts, and soon latched on to another one, and dropped more depth charges, but to no avail. As Ward neared the harbor entrance around 8, those on deck heard the sound of gunfire and explosions, and before too long, they saw the smoke beginning to darken the skies over Pearl Harbor. Soon, a strafing Japanese plane convinced the doubters on board that they were indeed now at war. Skepticism over whether or not Ward had really sunk a Japanese midget sub that morning persisted for decades. There was a belief among some that it was a false flag incident intended to help draw the U.S. into the war. All of that was finally put to rest in August of 2002, when scientists from the University of Hawaii found the sunken remains of the Japanese vessel. The wreck was found in American waters 1,200 feet beneath the sea, and about 3 to 4 miles outside of Pearl Harbor. The starboard side of the sub's conning tower has 1 shell hole, evidence of the damage done by Ward's number 3 gun. The destroyer's depth charges did no apparent structural damage to the craft, which appears to have been sunk by the single 4-inch round she took. For the remainder of the year and the first half of 1942, the venerable old destroyer continued her patrols in the vicinity of Pearl Harbor. As newer and more modern destroyers began joining the fleet in early to mid-1942, the old flush-deckers like Ward began to be assigned to other duties. Accordingly, Ward steamed to the Puget Sound Navy Yard in late 1942 to be converted into a high-speed transport ship. During the ensuing months, she began to take on an altered appearance. Her forward funnels were removed, as her forward boiler and fire rooms were converted to accommodate troops. 3-inch 50 caliber guns and 20mm Oerlikon autocannons replaced her 4-inch and 50 caliber machine guns, and she acquired 4 sets of davits to lower and raise landing craft. Ward was subsequently redesignated as APD-16 and got underway for the South Pacific on February 6, 1943. Ward spent the remainder of 1943 escorting convoys and transporting troops around the Solomon Islands, as well as supporting amphibious operations in the New Guinea and New Britain area. In December, Ward disembarked elements of the 1st Marine Division at Cape Gloucester, New Britain. She continued her escort and patrol work into 1944, while also supporting more amphibious operations along the northern coast of New Guinea as the Allies worked their way towards the Philippines. After steaming to Sydney, Australia in mid-August for an overhaul, Ward conducted transport and practice landing exercises in early September, before getting underway on the 10th for Morotai, where she landed troops on the 15th. Ward shifted to Cape Cretin on October 1st, where she loaded stores, ammunition, and 147 men of the 6th Army Ranger Battalion for transportation to the Philippines. She delivered them to Dinagat Island on the 17th, which had the potential to disrupt 6th Army's landing operations if it remained in Japanese hands. After initial delays due to bad weather, the operation went ahead on the 18th and was a resounding success. The Rangers on Dinagat raised the first American flag on Philippine soil since the early days of the war. After retiring to the Palau Islands in early November, Ward returned to Leyte on the 12th and escorted convoys around the area for the remainder of the month. On December 6th, Ward embarked 108 men of the Army's 77th Division and got underway for Ormoc Bay. At 6:30 on the morning of December 7th, the escorting destroyers left the screen to commence a shore bombardment. and 12 minutes later, Ward began disembarking troops into her landing craft. While she was patrolling later on that morning, Ward sighted a formation of 9 twin-engine Mitsubishi G-4M Betty bombers coming in from the north over Leyte. As the formation of Bettys flew over the destroyer Mahan, 3 broke off and headed for Ward in a loose V formation. Ward's 3-inch and 20mm guns began barking away and hit the center plane, which wavered and crashed into the ship at her waterline. The plane entered the forward part of her boiler room and the aft part of the lower troop space, and one of the plane's 2 engines continued on through the ship and exited at the waterline on the starboard side. An instant later, another Betty passed low over Ward and plunged into the water 200 yards off her starboard bow. The third attacker joined her partners, splashing into the water about 600 yards off her starboard quarter. Fires soon engulfed the troop spaces, which were fortunately unoccupied. Men in the forward part of Ward could not contact those aft, as the fires amidships had severed all communications. Several minutes after the kamikaze strike, water pressure dropped, which made it nearly impossible to fight the fires, and Ward was soon dead in the water. 2 boats were lowered in an attempt to fight the fires through the holes in the hull made by the entrance and exit of the Betty on its death run. At 10:15, the destroyer O'Brien, minesweepers Saunter and Scout, and her sister Crosby all promptly came to Ward's aid. O'Brien immediately moved in and commenced firefighting operations. In one of history's crazy twists of fate, O'Brien was commanded by Lieutenant Commander William W. Outerbridge, the same man who had commanded Ward during her encounter with the Japanese midget submarine off Pearl Harbor, and it was exactly 3 years since that day. By this point, however, she was on fire from bow to stern, and a series of explosions caused her commanding officer, Lieutenant Raymond F. Farwell, Jr., to order abandon ship at 10:24. Miraculously, only 1 man had been injured in the ordeal, and all hands left the ship in short order. O'Brien was ordered to sink Ward with gunfire. From the bridge of his new command, Lieutenant Commander Outerbridge watched as O'Brien's guns sank his first sea command. Years later, he recalled that there was little emotion involved in the task. Quote, "It just was something that had to be done." Ward sank at 11:30 on December 7, 1944 in Ormoc Bay, between Poro Island and Apali Point. Her name was stricken from the Navy Register on January 20, 1945. In early December of 2017, Ward's wreckage was located in 686 feet of water. Ward received 1 battle star for her World War II service as a destroyer and 8 as a high-speed transport. Thank you for watching, and as always, if you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button, comment, and subscribe. It really helps us out, and we greatly appreciate it. Once again, thank you for watching.